A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Shadows and Silence. The stone kitchens beneath the royal castle smelled of roasted meat and bitter herbs, smoke curling upward from the massive hearth where 3 deer carcasses turned slowly on iron spits. Freya wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, her copper-red hair escaping the braid she'd woven that morning. The heat was unbearable this close to the flames, but she preferred it to the alternative. Heat meant distraction. Heat meant her mind couldn't wander to places it shouldn't go. 3 years. She'd been here 3 years, and still the memories clawed at her when she let her guard down. The screams, the scent of blood soaking into earth, her mother's healing hands going still, her father's final roar cut short, Torrin's voice calling her name before silence swallowed everything. "Freya, you're burning the sauce." Becca's voice cut through the haze. Freya blinked, pulling the copper pot from the flame before the reduction turned to char. Her best friend stood beside her, flour dusting her dark hair, concern written across her features. "Sorry," Freya murmured, setting the pot aside. "Got distracted." "You've been distracted all week," Becca said quietly, glancing around to make sure the head cook wasn't listening. The older woman was busy berating 2 younger servants about improperly cleaned platters. "Is it the trial? The Luna trial." Of course it was the trial. How could it be anything else? For weeks the castle had buzzed with preparation. 12 candidates from the most powerful packs in the kingdom would arrive today, each hoping to catch the eye of Alpha King Valen Greymont and claim the title of Luna Queen. Freya had served in these kitchens long enough to know what such events meant. Endless work, impossible standards. And for her, a stark reminder of everything she'd lost. She had no pack anymore, no family. No status beyond the rough wool dress and calloused hands of a kitchen servant. She was Omega, the lowest rank in the shifter hierarchy, invisible to those who mattered. "It's nothing," Freya lied, returning her attention to the sauce, but Becca knew her too well. "You're worried about something," Becca pressed. "I can tell. You've been checking the stores obsessively, sniffing every ingredient twice before using it." Freya's jaw tightened. She couldn't explain the truth. Couldn't tell Becca about the gift her mother had passed down through blood and teaching. The ability to detect poison, to sense danger in what others deemed safe. It had saved Freya's life the night the rogues came. She'd smelled them before they attacked, given her family precious seconds of warning. Not that it had been enough. "The king is particular about his food," Freya said instead. "I'm just being careful." Becca opened her mouth to argue, but the heavy oak door burst open, and the head cook's bark silenced the room. "They're here! Candidates are arriving at the gate. The banquet must be perfect. Every dish inspected before it leaves this kitchen. Any servant who shames this castle will find themselves in the stocks. Move!" The kitchen exploded into controlled chaos. Freya fell into the rhythm she knew well, her hands steady as she portioned venison onto silver platters, arranged root vegetables with precision, drizzled sauce with careful attention. But beneath the calm exterior, her wolf stirred restlessly. Something felt wrong. She couldn't name it, couldn't pin it down, but the sensation crawled beneath her skin. Above them, in the great hall, Alpha King Valen Greymont stood before the floor-length windows overlooking his kingdom. The late afternoon sun caught the silver streaks in his black hair, made his golden eyes appear molten. At 32, he carried the weight of leadership in the set of his broad shoulders, in the way his jaw tensed when he thought no one was watching. "Your Majesty," Thaddeus approached, the commander of the guard's boots echoing against stone. "The candidates have begun arriving. Lord Edmund Thornberry's party is first through the gate." Valen's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his chest. Edmund Thornberry, one of the most powerful alphas in the realm, and one of the most dangerous. The man smiled too much, schemed too often, and had fingers in too many pots. Valen trusted him about as far as he could throw the castle itself. "And his daughter?" Valen asked. "Lady Evangeline is with him. She's considered the favorite among the candidates. Of course she was. Beautiful, well-bred, politically connected. Everything a Luna should be on paper." Valen turned from the window, his reflection ghosting across the glass. He caught sight of the scars on his knuckles, reminders of the battles that had brought him here. 10 years he'd ruled alone, refusing to take a mate despite tradition demanding it. 10 years since he'd found his father convulsing on the throne room floor, foam at his lips, poison burning through his veins while the guilty parties escaped into shadow. Trust no one. It was the lesson that death had taught him. And now the council demanded he place that trust in a stranger, bind himself to a woman he didn't know, all for the sake of politics and bloodlines. Assemble the candidates in the Great Hall, Valen ordered. Let's get this farce over with. Thaddeus bowed and departed. Valen remained by the window, watching as carriages rolled through the gates. Silks and jewels glittered in the fading light. Laughter carried on the evening breeze. They came for power, for status, for the chance to rule at his side. Not one of them came for him. Below, in the kitchens, Freya lifted a silver platter of roasted pheasant and froze. The scent hit her like a physical blow, subtle beneath the herbs and spices, but unmistakable to her sensitive nose. Her mother's voice echoed in memory, teaching her the signatures of different plants, the way certain compounds left traces that others couldn't detect. Monkshood, just the faintest hint, carefully disguised, but there, in the glaze coating the meat. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Someone had poisoned this dish. Someone in this kitchen. Or someone with access to the stores. And unless she was very much mistaken, this platter was meant for the high table. For the king. Freya? Becca appeared beside her, frowning at her expression. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Freya's mind raced. If she spoke now, if she caused a scene, who would believe her? She was nobody, an Omega servant with no proof beyond her word. They'd dismiss her, maybe punish her for disrupting the banquet. And whoever had done this would simply try again. But if she said nothing, and the king died, Becca, Freya whispered, gripping her friend's wrist, listen to me carefully. When we serve tonight, I need you to watch who handles the king's food. Every person. Remember their faces. Why? What's going on? Please, just trust me. Becca searched her eyes, then nodded slowly. Whatever she saw there convinced her not to argue. The great hall glowed with candlelight and anticipation. 12 young women sat in places of honor, arranged in a semicircle before the raised dais where the king would sit. Evangeline Thornberry occupied the center position, her white blonde hair cascading over shoulders bare above a gown the color of winter ice. She smiled serenely, the picture of confidence. Valen entered through the private corridor, and every head turned. He took his seat, Thaddeus at his right hand, and surveyed the assembled candidates. They preened under his gaze, each trying to catch his attention. He felt nothing. No spark. No recognition. Just the hollow ache that had become his constant companion. Let the feast begin, he announced, his voice carrying easily through the vaulted space. Servants emerged from the kitchen entrances, bearing platters of food that made the guests murmur with appreciation. Freya moved among them, invisible in her plain dress, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She watched as dishes were set before the candidates, watched as wine was poured. And then she saw it. The silver platter being carried toward the king's table. Roasted pheasant glazed and garnished, presented by a senior servant. Valen reached for the serving fork, and everything in Freya screamed. She didn't think. Couldn't think. Her body moved before her mind caught up, shoving past other servants, stumbling over the hem of her dress in her haste. Voices rose in confusion as she broke through the line of servers. "Don't eat that!" The words ripped from her throat, raw and desperate. She lunged forward just as Valen lifted a piece of meat toward his mouth, her hands connecting with the platter and sending it crashing to the floor. Food scattered across stone. Silver rang like a bell. And in the sudden, absolute silence that followed, Freya found herself on her knees amid the wreckage, breathing hard, staring up at the Alpha King. His golden eyes met hers, and the world stopped. A boy in Thornberry livery hovered by the spice alcove, too young for such fine colors, eyes blown wide with a fear that had no name. When Freya glanced his way, he flinched as if struck and vanished into the steam. Chapter 2. When Eyes Meet Fate. The silence stretched like a blade. Freya knelt amid scattered food and shattered silver, her chest heaving, copper hair falling loose from her braid. Every eye in the great hall fixed upon her, the weight of their stares pressed down until she could barely breathe. Above her, Alpha King Valen Greymont rose slowly from his chair. His golden eyes blazed with something Freya couldn't name, something that made her wolf whimper and cower inside her chest. Power radiated from him in waves, the unmistakable aura of an alpha in his prime, and she was nothing, nobody. An Omega servant who had just committed an act punishable by death. Seize her. The command came from Thaddeus, his hand already moving to his sword. 2 guards rushed forward, their grips bruising as they hauled Freya to her feet. The room erupted in chaos. Voices overlapped, some demanding explanation, others crying for immediate execution. Through it all, Valen said nothing. He simply stared at her, and the world narrowed to that single point of connection. The bond hit him like lightning striking stone. Mine. The word roared through Valen's consciousness, his wolf surging forward with feral possessiveness. His mate. Here. Now. The scent of her filled his lungs. Wild honey and herbs and something uniquely hers, that made his hands shake with the need to reach for her, to pull her close, to mark her as his before anyone else could touch her. But she was Omega, a servant. She'd just destroyed the Luna trial ceremony and assaulted his person. And worst of all, she looked at him with such pure terror that it carved something hollow in his chest. Your Majesty. Evangeline's voice cut through the turmoil, smooth and concerned. She stood from her place of honor, her ice blue gown catching candlelight. This creature has disrupted the sacred proceedings. Surely she must face justice for such an offense. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled alphas. Lord Edmund Thornbury rose as well, his expression grave. An attack on the king cannot be tolerated. She must be made an example of, lest others think they can act with such disrespect. She attacked no one. The words left Valen's mouth before he could stop them. His wolf snarled at the thought of anyone harming what was his. He forced his attention from the girl, forced himself to look at the ruined platter on the floor. She stopped me from eating. Why? Freya's throat worked. The guard's grip on her arms never loosened, and she could feel bruises forming. But worse than the physical pain was the agony building in her chest, a hollow ache that had appeared the moment their eyes met, the mate bond. She recognized it from her mother's teachings, from the stories whispered among unmated wolves. This man, this Alpha King, who could order her execution with a word, was her destined mate, and he would never accept her, could never accept her. The impossibility of it crushed her as surely as any blade. Answer your king. Thaddeus's voice held the edge of command. Why did you interrupt the feast? The food was poisoned, Freya whispered. Her voice barely carried, but in the tense silence everyone heard. I could smell it. Monkshood in the glaze. The hall erupted again. Evangeline's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Edmund's face darkened with rage. Other candidates gasped and drew back from their own plates, as if poison might leap from the china. Lies, one of the Alpha Lords shouted. She seeks to cause chaos, to disrupt the trial for her own purposes. What purposes could a kitchen servant possibly have? Valen's question silenced the room. He descended from the dais, each step measured and deliberate. His wolf pushed against his skin, demanding he go to her, claim her, protect her. He resisted with every ounce of control he possessed. How would poisoning me benefit someone of your station? Freya met his gaze, and the bond flared between them. She saw the recognition there, the knowledge that he felt, what she felt, and she saw him deny it, saw him lock it away behind duty and suspicion. It wouldn't benefit me at all, she said, finding strength somewhere deep. If she was going to die, she'd die with dignity. I don't want anything from you, Your Majesty. I only wanted to keep you from harm. Pretty words. Edmund stepped forward, his expression stern. But words prove nothing. This girl has made a serious accusation. If she's wrong, she slandered the candidates and deserves punishment. If she's right, then someone in this hall is a traitor. There's a simple way to determine the truth. Thaddeus moved to the fallen platter, studying the scattered food. A taster. No. Valen's refusal was instant. He wouldn't risk another life, not even a condemned prisoner's, on what might be paranoid fancy. But then he looked at the girl again, saw the certainty in her green eyes. The way her hands trembled, but her chin stayed raised. "Bring a prisoner from the dungeons," he ordered. "One already condemned to death. If the food is clean, then this girl faces execution for disrupting the trial and slandering our guests. If it's poisoned..." His jaw clenched. "Then we have a traitor to find." The weight stretched endlessly. Freya swayed on her feet, exhaustion and fear warring inside her. Becca stood frozen among the other servants, her face pale with horror. Their eyes met briefly, and Freya tried to convey reassurance she didn't feel. Guards returned with a man in chains, filthy and hollow-eyed. The prisoner looked at the scattered food with confusion, then something like hope. "You want me to eat this?" "Why? You'll receive a pardon if you survive," Valen said. It was a lie. The man was condemned for murder, and no amount of testing food would erase that crime. But Valen needed cooperation, and hope was a powerful motivator. The prisoner didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees and began shoveling food into his mouth. The meat Valen had almost consumed, the glaze Freya had detected. For a moment, nothing happened. Evangeline exhaled with relief, her hand on her father's arm. Edmund's expression began to shift toward righteousness. Then the prisoner convulsed. His body arched backward, spine bending at an unnatural angle. Foam bubbled at his lips. The sounds he made were inhuman. Gasps and gurgles as his throat swelled shut. Shifter metabolism was supposed to process poisons faster than humans, burn through toxins with supernatural efficiency. But monkshood was one of the few substances that could kill their kind. And it was killing him now. The prisoner died within minutes. His final breath rattled out across stone, and his body went still. The hall remained frozen. Then pandemonium broke loose. "Poison! There's poison in the food! Who brought that dish? Which servant prepared it? We could have all been killed!" Valen barely heard them. His attention locked on Freya as the guards released her in their shock. She stumbled, nearly falling, and his body moved without conscious thought. He caught her before she hit the floor, his hands on her arms exactly where the guards had gripped. The contact sent electricity through them both, the bond screaming recognition. "You saved my life," he said quietly, for his ears alone. "I couldn't let you die." Her voice broke. "Even if you're..." "What?" His hands tightened infinitesimally. "Even if I'm what?" But she couldn't say it. Couldn't voice the truth that burned between them, because he was king, and she was nothing. And the mate bond was a cruel joke played by fate. Thaddeus approached, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, we need to determine who prepared this dish. The kitchens must be searched," servants questioned. "Do it." Valen released Freya, and the loss of contact felt like tearing away skin. "And this girl remains in custody. She's the only witness we have, the only one who could identify the poison." "Custody?" Edmund stepped forward. "Your Majesty, with respect, perhaps she should be rewarded. She saved your life, or she's part of a larger conspiracy." Evangeline's voice carried clearly, pitched to reach every ear. How convenient that she detected poison no one else could smell. Perhaps she knew it was there because she helped place it. Perhaps this is all an elaborate ruse to gain your trust. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Valen saw the logic in the argument, saw how easily suspicion could twist truth. But his wolf rejected the possibility with absolute certainty. This girl, his mate, would never harm him, except he couldn't afford to trust that instinct. Not when his father had died from trusting the wrong person. "She'll be held in protective custody," Valen announced, "both for her safety and for questioning. The Luna trial is suspended until this matter is resolved. All candidates will remain at the castle as guests, and no one leaves until we find the traitor responsible." Freya's legs nearly gave out. Not execution. Not yet. But imprisonment, isolation, and worst of all, the mate bond pulling at her every moment she spent near this man who could never choose her. As guards led her away, gentler this time but no less firm, Freya looked back once. Valen stood amid the chaos, his golden eyes tracking her movement, his jaw clenched so tightly she could see the muscle jumping. Their gazes locked across the distance, and the bond sang between them. A connection neither wanted, but neither could deny. Everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 3. Truths Behind Stone Walls. The chamber they brought Freya to wasn't a dungeon cell, but it wasn't far from one either. A narrow room in the castle's eastern wing, furnished with a simple cot, a wooden chair, and a basin for washing. A single window, barely wider than her shoulders, looked out over the kitchen gardens where she'd worked for 3 years. The door closed behind her with the finality of a tomb ceiling, and she heard the guard take position outside. Freya sank onto the cot, her legs finally giving out. The adrenaline that had carried her through the feast, through the confrontation, through watching a man die from the poison she'd detected, drained away all at once. She pressed her hands to her face and breathed. Just breathed, trying to process everything that had shattered in the span of an hour. The mate bond thrummed beneath her skin, an ache that had nothing to do with physical injury and everything to do with the Alpha King currently somewhere in this castle. She could feel him, a distant pull like a compass needle seeking north. The sensation terrified her almost as much as it tempted her. Her mother had explained mate bonds during long evenings in their cottage, back when Freya had been young and believed in happy endings. "When you meet your true mate," her mother had said, hands gentle as they sorted medicinal herbs, "it will be undeniable. Your wolf will recognize theirs, and nothing in this world will feel more right or more terrifying." Freya hadn't understood the terrifying part then. She did now. A knock at the door made her jump. She stood quickly, smoothing her stained dress, as the guard opened the door to admit Commander Thaddeus. The beta moved with military precision, his expression carefully neutral as he took in the sparse room. "The king will speak with you now," Thaddeus said. "Come." They walked through torchlit corridors, passing servants who pressed themselves against walls to make room, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Freya kept her chin raised despite the humiliation of being escorted like a criminal. She'd saved the king's life. Whatever came next, she had that truth to hold on to. The study they entered was warmer than her chamber, a fire crackling in the hearth. Bookshelves lined the walls, and maps covered a massive oak table. Valen stood before the hearth, firelight casting his profile in sharp relief. He didn't turn as she entered, but his shoulders tensed minutely. He felt it too then, the bond pulling taut between them. "Sit," Valen said, his voice carefully controlled. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Thaddeus took position by the door, a silent witness. Freya sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Now, in the relative quiet, she could study him properly. The black beard trimmed close to his jaw, the way candlelight caught gold in eyes that should have been brown. The scar bisecting his right eyebrow, evidence of violence survived. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp edges and lethal purpose. "Tell me your name," Valen said, finally turning to face her. The full force of his attention stole her breath. "Freya, your majesty. And you've worked in the kitchens for how long?" 3 years. Something flickered across his features, too quick to name. 3 years in my castle, and I never knew you existed. I'm Omega, your majesty. We're meant to go unnoticed." The words came out sharper than intended, and Thaddeus shifted warningly, but Valen's expression didn't change. If anything, the tension in his jaw increased. "Tell me how you detected the poison," he said. "The truth, Freya. All of it." So she did. She explained about her mother, a healer in their small pack, who had possessed exceptional abilities with scent. How that gift had passed to Freya, enhanced beyond even her mother's range. How she could identify herbs and toxins, dangerous compounds hidden beneath layers of other scents. How she'd kept it secret because such abilities made one valuable, and valuable things were often taken by force. "Demonstrate," Valen ordered. He moved to a cabinet, retrieving several small vials. Eyes closed. Freya obeyed and heard him unstop the first vial. The scent hit her immediately. Lavender oil. Distilled, not fresh. Mixed with a carrier oil. Likely almond based on the undertone. The next vial. Dried willow bark. Old, maybe 2 seasons. Starting to lose potency. Another. Freya's nose wrinkled. Nightshade berries. Deadly if ingested. You shouldn't keep that near food preparation areas. I don't, Valen said quietly. This came from the healer's locked stores. He tested her with 6 more substances. She identified each one correctly, down to the subtle differences between similar compounds. When she opened her eyes, Valen was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Remarkable, Thaddeus murmured. Or convenient. Valen set the vials aside. How do I know you didn't plant the poison yourself? That this entire display isn't an elaborate scheme? The accusation stung, but Freya met his gaze steadily. Why would I? What could I possibly gain from killing you? Power. Position. Revenge for some perceived slight. He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. Or perhaps you work for someone else. Someone who wants me dead and saw an opportunity. If I wanted you dead, Your Majesty, I wouldn't have stopped you from eating. Oh, unless you wanted to be seen as a hero. To earn my trust before betraying it. Freya's hands clenched in her lap. The bond burned beneath her skin, her wolf whimpering at the distrust in her mate's voice. But she couldn't tell him that. Couldn't voice the connection thrumming between them, not when he clearly had no intention of acknowledging it. I have no ambitions beyond survival, she said quietly. I lost everything 3 years ago. My pack was destroyed, my family killed. I came here seeking shelter, nothing more. Valen's expression shifted, something softer bleeding through the suspicion. What happened to your pack? And there it was. The wound she never spoke of. The grief she'd buried beneath duty and exhaustion. But something about the way he asked, the genuine curiosity beneath the interrogation, loosened her tongue. Rogues, she said, the lie her pack's destruction had been classified as. They attacked in the night. We were a small pack, isolated in the northern forests. Easy prey. Her voice remained steady through sheer force of will. My mother tried to heal the wounded. My father fought to give us time to flee. My brother Torin, he was only 15. He wanted to be a warrior so badly. He tried to protect us. And you survived. Not an accusation. A statement heavy with understanding. I survived. The words tasted like ash. My mother's gift saved me. I smelled them before they reached our home, warned my family. It bought us seconds. Not enough to save them, just enough for me to run. Silence settled between them, broken only by the fire's crackle. Valen's jaw worked, and when he spoke again, his voice had gentled. I'm sorry for your loss. 3 years. And no one had said those words to her. Freya's throat tightened dangerously. Your Majesty, Thaddeus interjected carefully. What would you have me do with her? Valen turned to the window, his back to them both. The firelight silhouetted his frame, and Freya saw the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was measured. She stays in the castle, under protection, not imprisonment. Post guards at her door, but treat her with respect. She may have saved my life tonight. May have? Freya couldn't stop the question. He looked back at her, and the bond sang between them, impossible to ignore. I learned long ago not to trust easily. My father made that mistake. It killed him. Understanding dawned. Someone poisoned him too. 10 years ago. I found him convulsing on the throne room floor, foam at his lips, his body burning with toxins I couldn't name. I held him as he died, unable to do anything but watch. Valen's hands curled into fists. They never found who did it. Never found proof. Just theories and suspicions that led nowhere. So you trust no one, Freya said softly. Can you blame me? She couldn't. And yet the parallel between them struck hard. Both orphaned by violence. Both carrying wounds that never fully healed. Both alone despite being surrounded by people. No, she admitted. I can't. Something passed between them in that moment. A recognition that went deeper than words. Valen took a step toward her before catching himself, his expression shuddering. The bond pulled taut, demanding acknowledgement, demanding connection. Freya felt it in her bones, the rightness of being near him warring with the impossibility of anything more. "Return her to her quarters," Valen ordered Thaddeus, his voice rough. "Tomorrow we begin investigating who prepared the poisoned dish. For tonight, get some rest." As Thaddeus escorted her from the study, Freya glanced back once. Valen stood before the fire, his head bowed, one hand pressed against the mantel, as if holding himself upright. The image seared itself into her memory, this powerful alpha brought low by forces he couldn't control. Just like her. Chapter 4. Gardens and Ghosts. Days blurred together in a haze of investigation and frustration. Thaddeus questioned every kitchen servant, every guard who'd been on duty the night of the feast. The 3 kitchen hands who had handled the king's platter had vanished without a trace. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. Freya remained in her chamber, though the guards no longer locked the door. She was free to move about certain areas of the castle, always escorted, always watched. The isolation gnawed at her, but worse was the constant pull of the mate bond. She could feel Valen even when he was floors away, a magnetic tug that made her wolf whine and pace. On the 4th morning, Becca finally managed to visit. The guard allowed her entry with a warning look, and the moment the door closed, Becca threw her arms around Freya. "I thought they were going to execute you," Becca whispered, her voice thick with tears. "When you ran forward like that, I thought I'd lost you." "I'm fine," Freya assured her, though the lie tasted bitter. Nothing about the situation was fine. "Have you heard anything? Any news about the investigation?" Becca pulled back, glancing at the door before lowering her voice. "The servants are talking. 3 of our own missing, presumed dead. There are whispers that Thornberry Pack is involved, but no one will say it openly. Too dangerous. Thornberry." Freya's stomach clenched. "Evangeline's family. Keep this between us," Becca said urgently. "I was serving in the eastern wing yesterday, near where the noble families are housed. I heard 2 of Thornberry's servants talking. They said something about eliminating witnesses, about making sure loose ends were tied up. Freya, I think they killed those kitchen servants." The implications crashed over Freya. If Thornberry was behind the poisoning, and they'd murdered witnesses, then Evangeline herself might be involved. But why? What did she gain from the king's death beyond chaos? "There's more," Becca continued. One of their younger servants, a boy named Piers, looked terrified during that conversation. After the others left, he stayed behind, crying. I approached him carefully, and he's desperate to leave Thornberry's service. Says he's seen things, heard things that keep him awake at night. He wants out, but he's too afraid to run. Could he provide evidence? Freya's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe. If someone could promise him protection. Becca squeezed her hands. "I think you should tell Commander Thaddeus. This boy might be willing to steal information if it means freedom." Before Freya could respond, a knock at the door made them both jump. The guard opened it to admit Thaddeus himself, his expression unreadable. "Lady Freya," he said, the title still strange on his tongue. Valen had insisted she be addressed with respect despite her station. "The king requests your presence in the castle gardens. There's a matter he wishes to discuss regarding the poisonous plants used in the attack." Freya's heart hammered. The gardens. Alone with Valen. The bond thrummed in anticipation even as her mind screamed warnings. Becca squeezed her hand once more before departing, leaving Freya to follow Thaddeus through winding corridors. They emerged into afternoon sunlight, and Freya breathed deeply, savoring fresh air after days of confinement. The medicinal gardens sprawled before them, carefully tended beds of herbs and flowers used for healing and, in some cases, harm. Valen stood near a section of tall purple flowers, his back to her. He wore simpler clothes today, a dark tunic and breeches more suited to work than court. His black hair was tied back, revealing the strong line of his neck. As Freya approached, he turned, and the force of his golden gaze stole her breath. "Thank you, Thaddeus," Valen said. That will be all." The commander hesitated, clearly uncomfortable leaving them alone, but ultimately bowed and withdrew. The moment he was out of sight, the air between Freya and Valen crackled with tension. "You wanted to discuss the plants?" Freya managed, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I wanted you out of that room," Valen admitted. The garden seemed a suitable excuse. He gestured to the beds surrounding them. "Though, I am curious. Can you identify which of these are dangerous?" It was safer than acknowledging the bond humming between them. Freya moved through the garden, pointing out the deadly nightshade tucked between medicinal chamomile, the foxglove that could stop a heart, the monk's hood that had nearly killed him. Her fingers brushed over the leaves of a healing herb, and memory struck sharp and unexpected. "My mother used to gather these," she said softly. "Comfrey root. She'd make poultices for broken bones, salves for wounds. Her hands always smelled of it." Valen moved closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You miss her. Every day." The admission hurt. She was gentle but fierce. "She saved more lives than anyone knew. My father said she had healing hands, that the moon goddess herself had blessed her touch." Freya's voice cracked. "She couldn't save herself, though. Couldn't save any of them. My father was a warrior," Valen said quietly. "He believed strength was everything. That if you were powerful enough, cunning enough, you could protect those you loved from any threat." His jaw clenched. He was wrong. I held him as poison burned through his veins, and all my strength meant nothing. Freya looked up at him, saw the old pain etched in his features. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. The contact sent sparks through them both, the bond flaring bright and demanding. Valen's hand covered hers, and for a moment they simply stood there, connected by touch and tragedy. "I understand why you can't trust easily," Freya whispered. "After what happened, how could you? And yet I trust you." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. "I shouldn't. You're a stranger who appeared at the worst possible moment with abilities that seemed too convenient. Every logical part of me says to keep you at arm's length." His grip tightened. "But my wolf knows you, recognizes you, and for the first time in 10 years I don't feel alone." The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Freya's own wolf surged forward, demanding she close the distance, claim what was theirs. The mate bond sang with possibility. "Your Majesty," she began, but he cut her off. "Valen. When we're alone, call me Valen." "Valen," she breathed, and his eyes darkened at the sound of his name on her lips. "We can't do this. You're king. I'm nobody. The realm would never accept." He kissed her. The world exploded into sensation. His mouth was firm and demanding, one hand cupping her face while the other pulled her against him. Freya gasped, and he deepened the kiss, tasting her thoroughly. The bond roared in triumph, flooding them both with rightness, with the absolute certainty that this was meant to be. Freya's hands fisted in his tunic, pulling him closer even as her mind screamed that this was madness. His wolf rumbled possessively, and she felt the answering call from her own. "Mark her, claim her, make her ours," his beast demanded. Valen broke away with a growl, chest heaving. His eyes had gone molten gold, his wolf riding close to the surface. "This is dangerous." "Then stop," Freya challenged, even as she swayed toward him. "I can't." His voice was rough, almost broken. "Moon, help me, Freya. I can't stay away from you." "So don't." She reached for him again. But this time he caught her wrists, holding her at bay, even as everything in him strained toward her. "You don't understand what you're asking. If I claim you, if I give in to this bond, the political consequences." "I understand perfectly." Hurt bled through her voice. "You're an Alpha King, and I'm an Omega servant. The bond doesn't care about status, but you do. That's not fair, isn't it?" She pulled free of his grip. "You feel this thing between us just as strongly as I do, but you'll never choose me, will you? Because choosing me means admitting you can't control everything. That fate has a say in your life, and control is all you have left." The words struck true. Valen's expression closed off, his walls slamming back into place. "Return to your chamber. We're done here." Freya left before the tears could fall. her wolf howling in anguish at the separation. Behind her, Valen stood alone in the garden, one hand pressed to his chest, where the bond ached most fiercely. What neither of them saw was Evangeline watching from a tower window above, her expression calculating as she observed the entire exchange. Chapter 5. Blood and Vengeance. The body was discovered on the 8th day after the poisoning attempt. A hunter tracking deer through the northern forests stumbled upon it wedged between roots of an ancient oak, throat cut from ear to ear. The corpse had been there for days, animals having done their work, but enough remained to identify him as one of the missing kitchen servants. Thaddeus brought Freya to the commander's quarters to view the evidence, though he spared her the sight of the body itself. Instead, he showed her rubbings taken from the tree bark near where the man had died. Scratched deep into the wood, carved with what must have been the servant's final desperate effort, was a single word: Thornberry. He managed to leave us a message before they finished him, Thaddeus said grimly. This confirms our suspicions, but it's still not enough. One word scratched by a dying man won't convince the council to move against a pack as powerful as Thornberry. We need more. I might be able to help with that. Becca's voice came from the doorway. She stood there wringing her hands, clearly terrified but determined. Behind her cowered a young man, barely more than a boy, with the haunted eyes of someone who'd seen too much. This is Piers, Becca continued, drawing him forward. He serves House Thornberry. Tell them what you told me. The boy's voice shook, but his words were clear enough. He spoke of conversations overheard, of Lord Edmund's whispered meetings in the dead of night, of Evangeline's cold determination to become Luna by any means necessary. And most damning of all, he'd stolen something, a risk that could cost him his life. From within his tunic, Piers produced a leather pouch. Copies of Lord Edmund's private correspondences. I made them when he wasn't looking, knowing I might need them someday. I want out. I want protection from what they'll do when they discover I've betrayed them. Thaddeus took the pouch with careful hands, spreading the documents across his desk. Freya watched his expression darken as he read, watched the muscle in his jaw jump with barely contained rage. Your Majesty needs to see this immediately, Thaddeus said. He looked at Piers. You'll have protection, boy. Hide him in the East Wing servants' quarters, he told a guard. No one from Thornberry is to know he's here. Within the hour, Freya found herself back in Valen's study. The king stood rigid by the window, documents clutched in his hand, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. The mate bond thrummed between them, amplified by his fury. Freya could feel his wolf raging beneath his skin. It's all here, Valen said, his voice deadly quiet. The entire conspiracy. Edmund Thornberry has been planning this for years. Poisoning me was just the first step. Once I was dead, Evangeline would claim the throne as my chosen Luna, backed by Thornberry's military might. They'd eliminate any alphas who oppose them and rule through fear. There's more, Thaddeus said grimly. He held up another document. This correspondence is 3 years old. It references eliminating a small northern pack that had discovered too much about their preparations, a pack that posed a threat to their plans. The room seemed to tilt. Freya gripped the edge of Valen's desk, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. What pack? Yours. Valen's voice was gentle now, but the words hit her like physical blows. Freya, it wasn't rogues who destroyed your family. It was Thornberry. They sent warriors to massacre everyone who might expose their conspiracy, and they used their political influence to manipulate the investigation, to classify it as a simple rogue attack so no one would look deeper. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Freya's mother, her healing hand stilled forever. Her father, the strongest man she'd ever known, cut down in his prime. Torin, only 15 years old with dreams of becoming a warrior, never given the chance to grow. All of them dead not by chance, not by random violence, but by calculated murder. They killed my family. The words came out broken, barely a whisper. They killed them to protect a conspiracy. Yes. Valen crossed to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. The mate bond flared at the contact, but she barely felt it through the roaring in her ears. I'm so sorry, Freya. If I'd known, if I'd investigated more thoroughly, how could you have known? Her voice cracked. You said it yourself. They manipulated everything. made it look like nothing more than another tragedy in a dangerous world. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. My mother used to sing to Torin when he had nightmares. My father taught me to track by moonlight. They had lives, futures, dreams. And Thornberry took all of it. Rage replaced grief, hot and fierce and all-consuming. Her wolf surged forward, demanding blood, demanding justice for Pack slaughtered. "We need proof that will stand before the council," Thaddeus said carefully. "These correspondences help, but Edmund will claim they're forgeries. We need to force his hand, make him act openly. Then we use me as bait." Freya's voice steadied, hardening with resolve. "Announce that the king has chosen me as his Luna. Make it public. Make it official. Edmund and Evangeline will panic. They'll move against me, and when they do, you'll have your proof." "Absolutely not." Valen's refusal was instant. "I won't risk you that way. It's not your choice." Freya met his gaze unflinching. "This is about my family, my pack, my right to see justice done. Use me. Let them come. I'll be ready." The bond pulled taut between them, Valen's wolf howling in protest at the thought of his mate in danger. But Freya saw the moment he recognized the determination in her eyes, the same iron will that had survived a massacre and kept her going for 3 years. "We'll protect you," he said finally. "I swear it on my life." The announcement was made that evening before the assembled court. Valen stood on the dais, Freya at his side, and declared to the shocked nobility that he had chosen his Luna, the Omega servant who had saved his life, who had proven her worth beyond any candidate offered by politics or tradition. The hall erupted in chaos. Some alphas shouted in outrage. Others looked calculating, already adjusting their alliances. And at the back, Lord Edmund Thornberry's face went white with fury, while Evangeline's expression twisted into something ugly and desperate. "The claiming ceremony will take place in 3 days," Valen continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "Until then, my chosen Luna will be housed in the Eastern Tower for her protection as we prepare for the ritual." Becca found Freya as guards escorted her toward the tower. "I'm coming with you," she said, brooking no argument. "I don't care what anyone says. You're my friend, and I won't let you face this alone." "It's dangerous," Freya warned. "Good. I've lived too safely for too long." The tower room was spacious, well appointed, but still a cage. Freya stood by the window as night fell, watching torchlight flicker across the bailey below. The mate bond stretched between her and Valen, growing more painful with each moment of separation. Her chest ached, her wolf whining pitifully, desperate for the comfort of her mate's presence. In his own chambers, Valen paced, one hand pressed to his sternum where the bond burned hottest. He'd known mate bonds could be intense, but nothing had prepared him for this agony. Every instinct screamed at him to go to her, to claim her properly and end the torture of distance. "It doesn't matter what the council thinks," he said to Thaddeus, who'd remained as witness to his alpha's unraveling. "It doesn't matter that she's Omega, that she has no pack, that tradition says I should choose differently. She's mine. The moon goddess chose her for me. And I was a fool to deny it even for a moment. Then claim her when this is over," Thaddeus said quietly. "Truly claim her. Make her your Luna in every sense. The realm will adapt." In the tower, Freya pressed her palm to the cold stone and whispered to the mate she couldn't reach, "Come back to me. When this is over, come back to me." And in the shadows of the castle, Edmund and Evangeline met in secret, their faces twisted with rage and desperation as they planned murder by moonlight. Chapter 6. Blood Under Moonlight. The attack came on the second night, when shadows grew longest and the moon hung pale and indifferent in the sky. Freya woke to the sound of steel scraping stone, her wolf alerting before her conscious mind caught up. She rolled from the bed just as the door burst inward, splinters of wood exploding across the room. 5 figures in dark cloaks poured through the doorway, blades gleaming in the torchlight. Becca screamed from her cot near the fire, scrambling backward as the first assassin lunged. Freya shifted without thought, her human form dissolving into fur and fang. Her copper-red wolf was smaller than the male's, built for speed rather than power, but desperation made her deadly. She threw herself at the man threatening Becca, teeth sinking into his sword arm. Bone crunched beneath her jaws, and he shrieked, dropping his weapon. Another assassin grabbed her by the scruff, hauling her off and hurling her against the wall. Pain exploded through her ribs, but she twisted midair, landing on her feet. Two more rushed Becca, who'd grabbed a fire poker and was swinging it wildly. "Get away from her!" Becca's voice cracked with terror, but she stood her ground, protecting Freya even as blades descended. Freya remembered the small leather pouch she'd hidden beneath her pillow, the one containing monk's hood powder she'd kept from the garden visit. She shifted back to human form long enough to grab it, her hands shaking, then hurled the contents at the nearest assassin's face. The fine powder exploded in a cloud, and he clawed at his eyes, screaming as the poison burned. But there were still 4 others, and Freya was tiring. One of them drove a blade toward Becca's chest, and time seemed to slow. Freya watched in horror as her friend, her only friend in this cursed castle, threw herself sideways. The blade caught Becca's shoulder instead of her heart, but blood bloomed bright and terrible across her nightgown. No! Freya's scream was part human, part wolf. She launched herself at the attacker with renewed fury, all fangs and claws and mindless rage. They crashed together in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the floor. His blade scored her side, hot pain lancing through her, but she got her teeth around his throat and bit down. Miles away in his chambers, Valen bolted upright as agony tore through the mate bond. Not his pain, but hers. Terror and fury flooded the connection, and his wolf exploded forward with a roar that shook the stone walls. "Thaddeus!" His bellow brought the commander running. "The tower. They're attacking her." "Now!" They ran through corridors, Valen shifting mid-stride into his massive black wolf. Guards fell in behind them, but Valen outdistanced them all, driven by primal need to reach his mate. The bond pulled him like a rope around his chest, growing more frantic with each second. He burst through what remained of the tower door to find carnage. 2 assassins lay dead or dying, one with his throat torn out, another convulsing from poison. Freya stood in wolf form, blood matting her copper fur, swaying with exhaustion as 3 remaining attackers closed in. Becca lay crumpled against the wall, crimson spreading across the stones beneath her. Valen's roar shook dust from the rafters. The assassins turned, fear finally breaking through their determination, but it was far too late for mercy. He was upon them before they could raise their weapons, all tooth and claw and royal fury. The first died with Valen's jaws locked around his spine. The second tried to run and made it 3 steps before Valen brought him down. Thaddeus burst in with guards, tackling the third assassin before Valen could tear him apart. "We need one alive for questioning, Your Majesty." It took everything Valen had to shift back to human form, to resist the wolf's demand for complete slaughter. He stood naked and covered in blood that wasn't his own, chest heaving, and turned to find Freya. She'd collapsed, her wolf form giving way to reveal pale skin covered in wounds. Valen was beside her in an instant, gathering her into his arms. "I've got you. You're safe now. I've got you." "Becca," Freya gasped. "Help Becca, please. Get the healers." Thaddeus barked at the guards. "Both of them now." The 2 surviving assassins were dragged to the dungeons, and under Thaddeus's ruthless interrogation, they broke quickly. Yes, they'd been hired by Lord Edmund Thornbury. Yes, Lady Evangeline had given the direct order. Yes, they'd been promised fortunes and threatened with the murder of their families if they refused. And yes, Edmund had placed a loyal servant in the guard rotation weeks ago, someone who'd accepted Edmund's gold and opened the tower door from the inside. By dawn, Valen had summoned every alpha in the castle to the Great Hall. They assembled with obvious reluctance, many still rubbing sleep from their eyes. But none dared refuse the king's command. Edmund and Evangeline were brought in chains, their faces masks of barely controlled panic. By ancient writ, treason against the crown warranted the Dawn Blade. Alphas had bled for less. Valen stood on the dais, Thaddeus at his side, and the full weight of his authority pressed down on the assembly. Last night, assassins infiltrated my castle and attempted to murder my chosen Luna. They were captured. They confessed, and they named their employers. He gestured, and Thaddeus laid out the evidence. Piers's stolen correspondences, detailing years of conspiracy. The carved message from the murdered servant. The sworn testimony of the captured assassins. And most damning, a confession Thaddeus had extracted from Edmund's planted guard. Lord Edmund Thornbury. Valen's voice carried the weight of judgment. You stand accused of treason, conspiracy to commit regicide, and the murder of innocents. How do you answer? Edmund's composure cracked. These documents are forgeries. That boy Piers is a liar, and those assassins were tortured into false confession. I am a loyal servant of the crown. Then explain why your own guard confessed to accepting your gold to betray mine, Valen said coldly. He's lying to save himself. Edmund's voice rose desperately. He looked at his daughter, calculation flickering across his features. Your Majesty, I admit some of my servants may have acted without my knowledge. Perhaps my daughter... Father? Evangeline's voice was deadly quiet. Perhaps Evangeline orchestrated this plot without my awareness. Edmund continued, throwing his own child to the wolves. She was obsessed with becoming Luna. She must have acted alone, and I take responsibility for failing to notice her madness. The betrayal was absolute. Evangeline stared at her father, something breaking behind her ice-blue eyes. When she laughed, the sound held no humor, only the sharp edge of shattered illusions. You coward, she spat. You spineless, pathetic coward. She turned to Valen, chin raised in defiance. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I ordered the assassins. Yes, I planned to kill you with poison at the feast. And yes, my father orchestrated everything from the beginning. Her smile was knife-sharp. He wanted the throne, wanted the power, and he promised me I'd be queen. We killed that northern pack 3 years ago because they discovered our plans. We murdered the servants who handled the king's platter. We did it all together, father and daughter. And if I'm to burn for it, so will he. We did it all together. And if I'm going to burn for it, so is he. The hall erupted. Alphas who'd allied with Thornbury went pale, scrambling to distance themselves. Edmund lunged for his daughter, screaming denials, but guards restrained him. Valen let the chaos rage for a moment before his alpha command cut through it all. Silence. Every wolf in the room felt the weight of that order, submission rippling through their bones. Edmund and Evangeline Thornbury, Valen pronounced. You are guilty of treason, conspiracy, and murder. The sentence is death. You will be executed at dawn. The beheading took place in the castle courtyard as the sun rose. Freya, bandaged but insisting on attending, watched from a tower window as justice was served. When the blade fell once, then twice, she felt something in her chest finally release. It wasn't closure. Not truly. Her family couldn't be brought back. But it was enough to know their murderers would never harm anyone else. Valen found her thereafter, wrapped her carefully in his arms despite her injuries, and held her as she finally let herself cry. Chapter 7. Claiming the Moon. 3 days after the executions, the castle transformed. Thornbury Pack's allies had scattered, some pledging new loyalty to the crown, others retreating to their territories in shame. Those who remained gathered in the great hall once more. But the atmosphere had shifted. Fear had been replaced by cautious curiosity. And beneath it all, the undeniable truth that their king had made his choice. Freya stood in chambers that had once belonged to queens, her wounds still healing beneath the ceremonial gown they draped across her shoulders. The fabric was silver as moonlight, embroidered with copper thread that matched her hair. Becca fussed with the train, her own shoulder bandaged, but her spirits lifted by the healer's assurance that she'd recover fully. You saved my life, Freya said quietly. In that tower you could have run, should have run. But you stayed. You're my friend, Becca replied simply. Friends don't abandon each other. She stepped back, surveying her work. Besides, someone needs to keep you grounded when you're queen. Can't have you getting too grand. Luna, Freya corrected with a slight smile. Not queen. There's a difference. Not to the pack, there isn't. Becca squeezed her hand. You'll be brilliant. Just remember us little people when you're ordering everyone around." The great hall blazed with torchlight when Freya entered. Every alpha who'd remained in the castle stood in attendance, their expressions ranging from acceptance to thinly veiled disapproval. At the far end, Valen waited on the dais, and the sight of him stole her breath. He wore formal attire, black and silver, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, beard neatly trimmed. His golden eyes tracked her approach, with an intensity that made her wolf sing. The mate bond thrummed between them, stronger now after days of separation and trauma. It pulled her forward, step by careful step, until she stood before him. "My lords and ladies," Valen's voice carried easily through the vaulted space, "we gather tonight to witness the claiming of my Luna. Some of you have questioned this choice. Some have called it madness to elevate an Omega to such a position." His gaze swept the assembly, daring anyone to speak. "You see her rank. You see her lack of family connections, her absence of political power. And you think me weak for choosing her." Silence held, tension crackling. "Let me tell you what I see," Valen continued. "I see a woman who risked execution to save my life, who detected poison that would have killed your king and thrown this realm into chaos. I see someone who survived the massacre of her entire pack, who rebuilt herself from nothing, who fought assassins with tooth and claw to protect others." His hand extended toward Freya. "Strength doesn't come from the circumstances of your birth. It comes from what you do when everything is taken from you. It comes from choosing to stand when falling would be easier." Thaddeus stepped forward, his voice ringing clear. "As commander of the King's Guard and beta of this pack, I support this union. Lady Freya has proven her worth beyond any doubt. Any who question her place question their king." The statement hung heavy with warning. Slowly, other voices rose in agreement. Not all, but enough. The alphas who'd allied with Thornberry kept their silence, their shame too fresh. "The moon goddess chose her for me," Valen said, his voice gentling as he looked at Freya. "And I was a fool to deny that truth even for a moment. Politics be damned. Tradition be damned. This is my mate, and I will have no other." He descended from the dais, taking Freya's hand. The touch sent electricity through them both, the bond flaring bright and demanding. "Do you accept this claiming?" he asked, the ritual words carrying weight beyond their simplicity. "Do you accept me as your mate, your alpha, your partner in all things?" Freya's throat tightened. She thought of her mother's gentle hands, her father's strength, Torin's bright laughter. They'd never see this moment, but somehow she felt them with her, their love a warmth in her chest. "I accept," she whispered. Then louder, "I accept." The hall erupted in howls, wolves giving voice to approval. Valen pulled her close, and when his lips met hers, the bond exploded into something transcendent. His wolf and hers recognized each other, called to each other, demanded completion of what had begun the moment their eyes first met. "Come," he murmured against her mouth. "The ceremony is traditional, but what happens after is just for us." They completed the public rituals with careful precision. The exchange of vows before witnesses, the symbolic sharing of bread and wine, representing pack and prosperity. The presentation of Freya to the assembly as Luna, her new title spoken aloud for all to hear. Through it all, the mate bond pulled tighter, the need for true claiming growing unbearable. Finally, blessedly, they were allowed to withdraw. Valen led her through corridors to his private chambers, the rooms that would now be theirs. The moment the door closed, his control shattered. He pressed her against the wall, his mouth claiming hers with bruising intensity, hands mapping her body through the ceremonial gown. "I need you," he growled, his wolf riding close to the surface. "Moon, help me, Freya. I need to complete this bond before I lose my mind." "Then claim me," she breathed, her own wolf demanding the same. "Mark me. Make me yours." They shed clothing with desperate urgency, fabric tearing in their haste. When Valen lifted her, she wrapped her legs around his waist, gasping as their bodies finally joined. The sensation was overwhelming, pleasure and rightness and completion all at once. He carried her to the bed without breaking their connection, laying her down with surprising gentleness, despite the feral hunger in his eyes. "Tell me if it's too much," he said, even as his hips moved, driving deeper. "Tell me if I hurt you." "More," Freya demanded, her nails raking down his back. "Don't hold back. I can take it. I want all of you." Valen's control snapped completely. He claimed her with primal intensity, each thrust accompanied by possessive growls. The mate bond sang between them, weaving their souls together with threads of gold. When his teeth sank into the junction of her neck and shoulder, marking her as his, Freya screamed his name. The pleasure was so intense it bordered on pain, her body arching beneath him as the marking completed. Her own wolf surged forward, demanding reciprocation. When her teeth found his shoulder, when she marked him in return, Valen roared. The bond settled into place with a finality that felt like coming home. They were two halves of one whole, mates in every sense that mattered. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, the scent of their joining thick in the air. Valen traced the mark on her neck with gentle fingers, satisfaction rumbling through his chest. "Mine," he murmured. "My mate. My Luna. Mine. Yours," Freya agreed, her own fingers finding his mark. "And you're mine. Don't forget that part." "Never." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. Trust. The belief that good things can still happen despite everything. We've both lost too much," Freya said quietly. "But maybe we can build something new together. Something better." The next morning, Freya held her first official act as Luna. She summoned Becca, who entered the throne room with obvious nervousness, curtsying awkwardly. "Rise," Freya said, unable to suppress a smile. "You're my friend, Becca. You don't need to bow." "Actually, she does," Valen corrected gently from his throne beside hers. "You're Luna now. Certain protocols must be observed." "Fine, but only in public." Freya turned back to Becca. "I'm creating a new position, lady-in-waiting to the Luna. The role comes with chambers in the royal wing, a generous stipend, and significant influence in court matters. I want someone I trust by my side, someone who will tell me when I'm being an idiot." "Interested?" Becca's eyes filled with tears. "I'd be honored." "Good. Because we have work to do." Freya's expression grew serious. "I'm establishing a new council, one that represents all ranks, not just alphas. Betas, omegas, even servants will have voices in how this kingdom is run. Too many people have been ignored for too long. That changes now." The reforms took months to implement fully, but the foundation was laid that day. A kingdom that had been built on rigid hierarchy began, slowly, to shift. Chapter 8. What Remains. 2 moons after the claiming, when courtly tempests finally calmed, the healers confirmed what her body had begun to whisper. Now, 6 months on from that night, Freya was 4 months along. 6 months passed, and the kingdom transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The reforms Freya had instituted took root slowly, meeting resistance from traditionalists, but gaining support from those who'd been voiceless for too long. The new council met weekly, representatives from all ranks debating matters of trade, justice, and pack welfare. It was messy, often frustrating, but undeniably more just than what had come before. Freya stood in the medicinal gardens on a crisp autumn morning, her hand resting absently on the gentle swell of her abdomen. 4 months along, and the pregnancy had finally begun to show. The announcement had sent ripples through the realm, a mixture of celebration and, from some quarters, begrudging acceptance. An heir was coming, proof that the moon goddess herself had blessed this union. "No, not that one," Freya corrected gently, catching a young servant's hand before she touched a delicate purple flower. "That's monkshood. Deadly if ingested. See how the leaves are shaped differently from the comfrey beside it? It's easy to mistake one for the other if you're not careful." The girl, no more than 15, nodded solemnly. "My mother says you saved the king with knowledge like this." "I did," Freya confirmed. "Which is why I want all of you to learn. Knowledge is power, regardless of your rank. The ability to heal, to identify danger, to protect those you care about, that matters more than any title." There were 8 students gathered today, ranging from kitchen servants to the children of lesser nobles. Freya taught them all equally, sharing the wisdom her mother had passed down. It felt like honoring her family's memory in a way that mattered, ensuring their legacy lived on through healing rather than violence. Lady Luna. Becca appeared at the garden gate, her formal title still strange despite months of use. She'd grown into her role as lady-in-waiting with surprising grace, her natural compassion making her beloved among the servants. The delegation from the Northern Territories has arrived. They're requesting an audience. Freya sighed, reluctant to leave her plants and students. Tell them I'll be there shortly. Let me finish this lesson first. Already done. Becca grinned. I told them you were occupied with important Luna business and scheduled them for this afternoon. You've been out here since dawn. Come inside, have some breakfast, rest for a moment before the politicking begins. You're too good to me. Someone has to be. You'd work yourself into the ground otherwise. Becca linked arms with her as they walked toward the castle. How are you feeling? Any nausea today? Not as bad as yesterday. Freya's hand went to her stomach again, a protective gesture that had become habit. The healer says everything is progressing well. Strong heartbeat. Active. Like mother. Like child, Becca said warmly. This little one will probably be causing trouble from birth. They found Valen in the council chamber, bent over maps with Thaddeus. He looked up as they entered, and the smile that crossed his face made Freya's heart skip. 6 months, and he still looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. There you are, he said, crossing to kiss her forehead. His hand joined hers on her belly, and she felt him smile when the baby kicked in response. Our child is restless today. Takes after you, Freya teased. Takes after us both, he corrected. His expression grew more serious. The Northern delegation is here about the memorial. They've finished the construction. Freya's throat tightened. The memorial for her pack, built on the land where they'd lived and died, had been her idea. A place to honor those who'd been erased from history, to ensure their names would never be forgotten. Valen had supported it without hesitation, providing funds and labor to create something worthy of their memory. I want to see it, she said, before winter makes travel impossible. I need to see it finished. Then we'll go tomorrow, Valen decided. Together. The journey north took 3 days by carriage, with an escort of guards. The landscape changed as they traveled, forests growing thicker, mountains rising in the distance. Freya recognized it, even after 3 years, the shape of the land calling to something deep in her bones. The memorial stood in a clearing where her pack's central hall had once been. Crafted from white stone, it rose 3 times her height, carved with names. Every member of her pack who'd died that night, from the eldest elder to the youngest child. At the base, an inscription. They lived with honor. They died with courage. They will never be forgotten. Freya pressed her hand to the stone, finding her family's names. Her mother, whose healing hands had saved so many. Her father, strong and protective to the end. And Torin, only 15, who dreamed of becoming a warrior and never got the chance. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I survived when you didn't. I'm sorry it took so long for justice. But I promise you, I promise, your deaths meant something. The kingdom is changing because of what happened to you. I won't let your memory fade. Valen's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. He said nothing, simply held her as she grieved, his presence a solid anchor in the storm of emotion. Thank you, she finally managed. For this. For all of it. You never have to thank me for doing what's right, he said quietly. Your family deserved to be remembered. Their deaths deserved justice. And you deserved a mate who would stand beside you through all of it. They spent the night in a nearby village. And in the morning, Freya performed a small ritual. She planted comfrey seeds around the memorial's base, the healing herb her mother had loved. In spring, they would bloom, a living tribute to lives lost. The journey back felt lighter somehow, as if laying her ghost to rest had freed something in her chest. She dozed against Valen's shoulder as the carriage rolled toward home, his hand protective over their child. When they arrived at the castle, Thaddeus met them with news. Two of the alphas who'd been most vocal in their opposition to Freya's elevation had formally pledged their support. The pregnancy had shifted something, made her position undeniable even to the staunchest traditionalists. "They're finally accepting that this isn't temporary," Thaddeus said. "You're not going anywhere, and neither is the child you carry. The realm is adapting." "Good," Valen said firmly, "because I'm done compromising on this. Freya is my Luna, my mate, my partner in all things. Anyone who can't accept that can find another kingdom to serve." That evening, Freya returned to the medicinal gardens, her favorite place in the entire castle. The autumn air held a bite now, warning of winter's approach. But she'd always loved this time of year. The way light slanted gold through the trees, the smell of earth preparing for sleep. Valen found her there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. He stood watching her for a moment. This woman who'd transformed his life so completely. She knelt among the herbs, her pregnant belly making the position awkward, but her expression was peaceful. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "Everything," she admitted. "How much has changed? How much we've survived? How impossible this all seemed just months ago." She looked at him, her green eyes catching the fading light. "I was nobody, a servant, an omega without a pack. And now I'm your Luna, carrying your child, helping to reshape a kingdom." "You were never nobody," Valen said fiercely. "You saved my life. You survived impossible loss. You had strength and courage long before I ever met you. I just gave you a platform to use it. We gave each other a reason to hope again," Freya corrected. "After everything we'd lost, we found each other, found something worth fighting for." He pulled her close, breathing in her scent, feeling the life growing between them. His wolf was content in a way it had never been before, finally at peace after years of restlessness and rage. "I love you," he said, the words still new enough to feel precious. "I love you for your courage, your compassion, your refusal to accept injustice. I love you for saving me, in more ways than just from poison. And I love you for giving me a future I'd stopped believing in." "I love you too," Freya whispered. "My mate, my alpha, my impossible, stubborn, wonderful king." They sat together as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by plants that healed and protected. In the distance, the castle glowed with torchlight, filled with people who'd accepted their unlikely Luna. Above them, the moon rose full and bright, the goddess whose bond had brought them together watching over her children. And in the spring, when the baby arrived, strong and healthy and already stubborn as both parents, the kingdom celebrated, not because tradition demanded it, but because hope had been reborn in a place where darkness had once reigned. Because an Omega and an Alpha King had proven that love, true love born of fate and choice in equal measure, could overcome anything. The memorial gardens bloomed that spring too, comfrey flowers opening white and purple around white stone, life honoring death, and the cycle continuing as it always had and always would.